My friends, I've come here today because as Prime Minister of Israel, I feel a profound obligation to speak to you about an issue that could well threaten the survival of my country and the future of my people: Iran's quest for nuclear weapons.
That was Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressing for the third time a joint session of Congress. That is the first foreign leader since Winston Churchill to do that act. And joining us now is KT McFarland, national security analyst for Fox News. Well, KT, your impression, was he Churchillian?
Yeah, I think he was very Churchillian, and he laid out a very strong case to what's about to happen and what will happen and beleaguer us for the next decade, and challenged the very security and existence of his nation. So like Churchill, who warned about Hitler, who warned about the Nazis, like Churchill, who warned about Stalin, who warned about the communists, I think that Netanyahu doesn't just have the right to do it. I think he has a responsibility, even if it'll come at great personal price to himself.
Yeah.
And it may. I mean, chances are that this is not going to help him back home politically. It's going to do just the opposite. But I think he really feels that there's a president who is just not going to be on their side. I mean, I've concluded, I think, as I assume Netanyahu and many others in the region have, that President Obama just is unwilling to see this threat, or if he sees it, he's unwilling to do anything about it. Or if he's not, maybe he's just in over his head. And frankly, it's probably a combination of all of the above. He's going to get an agreement with Iran that's going to effectively say, Iran, you've got a lot of nuclear facilities, unplug them for a couple of years. And we're going to come by every now and then to make sure they're unplugged. But, nothing's to prevent them from being plugged back in. And at the end of 10 years, you go plug them back in and do whatever you want. And it's based on a premise on the part of the administration, the guys who believe in the long arc of history, everything's going to work out just fine, that somehow 10 years from now, Iran will be under different leadership and be a very different nation. But I've got a lot of problems with that. And one of them is, what if they decide to plug it back in anytime they feel like it? Now their economy is going to boom. This is going to be like the California gold rush of all the companies that want to do business with Iran, who've not been doing business with Iran for a generation. And Apple Computer's already negotiating to put distribution centers into Iran to sell the iPhone. So Iran is about to become the dominant country in the entire region, the dominant economic country, military country, largest population for sure, and potentially a nuclear weapons state. And it doesn't really matter what President Obama believes is going to happen, or even the mainstream media. It's what the other countries in the region think are going to happen. So if you look at what they've done in the last couple of weeks, they've done the following. Egypt has just signed a nuclear deal with Russia. The Saudis, the Bahrainis, other wealthy Gulf oil states have said, well, if Iran goes nuclear, we need to get ours too, and they can afford to buy them. And you've seen other countries in the region, particularly Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, under the leadership of President Sisi of Egypt, trying to pull together a joint Arab force in real time that's not being armed as adequately as it should by the Americans. So they all think that America's leaving the Middle East and leaving Iran in charge. They're on their own.
All right. So, Nancy Pelosi, the minority leader of the House, held a little press conference and said that she was near tears during this entire speech, and that she found that the level of discourse and the speech offered by Benjamin Netanyahu was insulting to the American people and to Congress. Now, you're a very respected national security analyst. As you listened to Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday, did you find anything about that speech that you found insulting?
I just think for all the people who want to prance around and complain about, he wasn't invited, this is a breach of protocol, he didn't put his pinky finger up when he was drinking the tea. I think they ought to go live in Jerusalem for a while.
Yeah.
Go see how you guys like it.
Yeah, and actually, let me follow up on that point, because we heard the president echo the David Axelrod talking points that Axelrod was kind enough to tweet out so the president and his minions could see them. And he kept saying this.
The Prime Minister didn't offer any viable alternatives.
Didn't offer any viable viable alternatives. That was the big talking point from the left yesterday. First of all, is it really incumbent on him to come up with viable alternatives when he's not at the table?
Come up with some very good alternatives.
And thank you. What were those alternatives from your mind?
That you use economic pressure and that you don't release the sanctions. You don't let all this stuff happen unless Iran does three things. One, stop supporting terrorists in the region. Two, stop being the world's greatest sponsor of terrorism. And three, stop the nuclear program.
And stop threatening to annihilate Israel. I mean, the reason that...
If you're going to live on Twitter, Mr. President, why don't you go be a Twitter follower of the supreme leader of Iran? Because every week he tweets out how he's going to destroy Israel.
So let me ask you this. Let's focus now on these negotiations as John Kerry, hurriedly runs to the table there in Geneva. And by the way, Iran today, the big talk about this 10-year deadline on the plan, Netanyahu brought it up. Iran today has said, those 10 years, that's unacceptable. So even that is unacceptable to Iran. KT, isn't it true that the only way to really get a hostile entity like Iran to do what you want them to do and to submit to your will is to have not only the economic sanctions and bolster those sanctions, but to have a very real threat of military intervention? They're not going to stop their nuke program unless they truly think U.S. bombers are going to destroy that nuclear program, right?
I'm not one of those people who says, it's either a choice of let them do what they're doing or bomb them. I think there's just a great space in the middle that we ought to be living in. When President Reagan came into office, he had his plan, his whole policy towards the Soviet Union was, we're not going to just live with you threatening to kill us. We're going to take you down, but we're not going to take you down with the military. We're going to put pressure on your economy to the point where your people take you down. Your people change things. And that, I think, with Iran is where we ought to be. If the president really cared about the rights of the people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, he should have supported the Arab Spring in Iran, which it started in Iran.
Right.
The demonstrators in Iran were the pro-democracy guys.
He let them bleed in the streets.
He let them bleed in the street. Yeah. But Iran is the most educated, it's the most literate, it's the most tech-savvy country in the entire region. I would target that part of Iran. I would target the economy, take down their cyber walls, let their people, find out what their supreme leader is tweeting out on a regular and frequent basis, and then let matters take their own time, which means that their people will rise up the same way they did and get rid of the Shah. They should rise up and get rid of the mullahs.
In a related matter, it appears that the Iraqis have some kind of offensive underway to retake Tikrit. And one hears that maybe the Iranians are actually right there helping them.
The Iranians have been running the Iraqi army for over a year. The major Iranian military leader and hero, their Lafayette, has been in Iraq for over a year training the Iraqi military. I mean, it's like there's an office somewhere in downtown Baghdad where the Americans are in one office, the Iraqi army's in the middle office, and the Iranian military is in the next
our guest at 8:05, Eli Lake, this morning from Bloomberg, he was just in Iraq. He said that out in the open, on the streets, there are portraits of Supreme Leader Khamenei. It's becoming an Iranian satellite.
It is Iran's sock puppet.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
We're going to leave it right there, KT. Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.